Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Unleashed. I have some dear friends that are in the LGBTQ community. I love them and respect them. The funny thing is, it's always been a non-issue in our friendships. It's just one aspect of their lives, just like me being married to my husband is one aspect of who I am. So this episode comes from that place of love and respect to gently offer some thoughts about the month-long celebration of Pride and the growing influence of gender ideology in our society. Let's explore these issues with an open mind and a sincere desire to foster positive change. Pride Month originated from the historic Stonewall riots in 1969 and aimed to advocate for equal rights and the free assimilation of the LGBTQ individuals into the community. However, over the years, the movement has evolved. While activism plays a crucial role in advancing rights and addressing some systemic prejudice, it is essential to acknowledge that the LGBTQ community now possesses the same legal rights as everyone else. Therefore, the focus must shift towards changing hearts and minds within society through dialogue and understanding, not showmanship or violence. Contrary to its intended purpose, Pride Month often leads to rainbow exhaustion among the general population, and including allies and LGBTQ individuals themselves. Instead of fostering unity and acceptance, the continuous bombardment of rainbow messaging, accompanied by extravagant celebrations and parades, can contribute to the hardening of hearts and the exacerbation of division within society. Moreover, the proliferation of additional LGBTQ awareness periods throughout the year, alongside relentless media coverage and commercialization, can dilute the significance and impact of Pride. To truly affect change and promote unity, the movement must reevaluate its strategies. Rather than perpetuating victimhood narratives and engaging in divisive activism, the focus could be on building bridges, fostering mutual respect, and engaging in empathetic conversations. By living their lives as integrated members of society, they become living proof of the value of diversity. It is through personal connections and individual transformation that they can create lasting change. Those personal connections helped me grow close to the movement as I grew my franchise company, Camp Bow Wow, starting over 2 decades ago. We embraced diversity among our franchisees and customers and became a beloved brand in the gay community. We loved all our customers and franchisees. We were all bonded by our mutual love of dogs. The commercialization of Pride often overshadows its true meaning, as corporations, organizations, and municipalities seize the opportunity to profit from this month-long celebration, or maybe even lose profit, as we've seen recently, for taking it too far. It is vital to critically evaluate the impact and effectiveness of Pride Month as a tool for social change. The movement should redirect its focus towards fostering unity and understanding rather than perpetuating division and fatigue. And what does Pride mean for people of faith? For those who hold traditional religious beliefs on sexuality and marriage, this month can be really challenging to navigate. It can evoke feelings of conflict, isolation, and a struggle to reconcile personal convictions with the prevailing cultural norms. As people of faith, we are called to love and accept all individuals, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. But it can be difficult to navigate the fine line between maintaining our biblical beliefs and demonstrating love and respect for those who identify as LGBTQ. The Christian faith teaches us to be compassionate and understanding towards others, towards everyone. However, this compassion should not compromise the truth as revealed in the Bible. It becomes challenging when we are expected to fully embrace and affirm behaviors that our faith considers contrary to God's design for human relationships. Striking a balance between showing love and speaking truth can be a delicate task requiring wisdom and discernment. During Pride Month, expressing dissenting views on matters of sexuality can lead to misunderstanding and even rejection from both the LGBTQ community and wider society. People of faith who hold traditional beliefs may face accusations of intolerance, discrimination, or even bigotry. This can be very disheartening, especially when intentions are rooted in a desire to adhere to faith while still loving our neighbors. Rather than retreating into silence or adopting an antagonistic approach, people of faith have an opportunity to engage in meaningful dialogue during Pride Month. This involves actively listening to the stories and experiences of those in the LGBTQ community and seeking understanding and expressing our own perspectives with humility and respect. Engaging in respectful conversations can foster mutual understanding, it can bridge divides, and it can build genuine connections. Seek out a community of like-minded believers who can provide support, encouragement, and guidance on this path. Share your struggles, your doubts, and your questions with trusted friends or spiritual mentors who can offer wise counsel and pray with you. Together, you can navigate the difficulties while staying rooted in your faith. Shifting gears, let's turn our attention to the concerns regarding children and the movement. Many believe it's important for the LGBTQ movement to prioritize adult conversations and leave kids out of it, allowing children to develop their identities at their own pace and within appropriate contexts. Childhood is a time of wonder, exploration, and discovery. In a society that already pushes them to grow up too quickly, it's so important to preserve the innocence and carefree nature that define this stage of life. By keeping conversations surrounding sexual orientation and gender identity limited to adult discussions, we can protect children from being prematurely exposed to complex and potentially confusing concepts that may not align with their developmental stage. Many kids and teenagers are struggling right now, especially as they're going through puberty, like we all did. And the truth is, it's perfectly normal for them to question who they are at this age. Children undergo a process of self-discovery as they grow and mature, and it's important that we give them space to explore their interests, their values, and their identities without undue influence or pressure. But it's not a teacher's job to change a child's identity, and the education system is often where this conversation is beginning. Take my friend Erin Lee, for example. I interview Erin in the very first episode of Unleashed about her 6th grade daughter being invited by a teacher to a secret after-school arts club that was actually a meeting about trans and queer identity. Her daughter was asked who she was sexually attracted to at age 12 years old and was told it was okay to lie to her parents about it. The speaker at the said meeting told the kids that if they were not fully comfortable in their bodies, they may be trans and that their families were not safe to talk to about it. They should talk to her or message her directly. The education system plays a vital role in shaping children's perceptions and beliefs. This is why the topic of sexual orientation and gender identity should be handled very carefully within educational settings. Rather than focusing on specific identities or rather changing one's identity, educational institutions should prioritize promoting inclusivity, empathy, and respect for all individuals. School should be a place where they are able to be just a kid without any pressure of changing who they are. By leaving kids out of the conversation, we create space for them to develop a strong sense of self before being exposed to external narratives that may influence their understanding of their own identity. Parents play a fundamental role in guiding their children's upbringing and teaching them values and beliefs that align with their family's convictions. LGBTQ activists should respect the autonomy of parents to address these sensitive topics with their children according to their own values, their own cultural backgrounds, and religious beliefs. By allowing parents to navigate these discussions in a manner that is in line with their family's values, we uphold the principles of diversity, inclusion, and parental rights. Let's talk for a minute about parents' rights and how this obsession with gender plays into a bigger picture. I talked about this in episode 6 with Ollie London, but I think it's important to come back to. It seems that Colorado Democrats, including our governor, wholeheartedly believe that their power over our children is a priority over that of the parents. They seem to believe that our children are their possession, the state's possession, and the responsibility of the government, not the parents or the families. This is crazy. And the massive thrust towards transgenderism is part of this. They're pushing this dangerous narrative on our kids through screens, especially social media, through our schools, infiltrating our education system with programs that queer the curriculum and expose kids as young as 1st grade to gender ideology and sex talk. Through radical medical experimentation like secret psychotherapy as young as 12 years old, or letting our kids get abortions or mastectomies and puberty blockers without one parent consenting. Our governor is leading the charge on this front, making us the very first trans tourism state in the country. Because this is a recent phenomenon, there hasn't been much research on the long-term effects this could have on our kids. Basically, it's like a big science experiment that's been conducted on our children. In episode 6, Ollie talks about some research he's found on his own that he discusses in his new book, Gender Madness. The few studies out there say that long-term hormone use can lead to issues with bone growth, it can shut down the growth of children, it can lead to 6 times an increase in heart attacks, heart murmurs, and blood clots. That's dangerous for our kids. We've got to do better. And for those of you who think this isn't really happening, it is. The number of transgender youth doubled in the last 5 years, and children's mastectomies are up 389%. 10 to 20 years ago, many kids wouldn't have even thought about these things, nonetheless knowing what they were. But now suddenly we see a huge number of kids wanting to transition or be on hormones, and parents supporting that. It's a real push by schools, gender clinics making millions of dollars on this movement, influencers and celebrities, and of course our government. I'm not dismissing the fact that it's vital that we provide comprehensive support for our LGBTQ youth. This includes providing access to resources and offering guidance from trained professionals who can assist them in their journey of self-discovery. By prioritizing age-appropriate support systems, we ensure that LGBTQ youth receive the assistance they need while still allowing them the freedom to explore their identities within the appropriate context. So let's go back to Pride Month, specifically through the lens of kids. Well, some Pride Month events and displays are not age-appropriate for young children. Discussions about sexual orientation and gender identities might be better suited for older age groups who can fully comprehend these concepts. Brands and schools promoting Pride Month to children may undermine parental authority and values. That's not okay. Research shows exposing children to discussions about sexual orientations and gender identities at a young age can be confusing and overwhelming. And finally, it seems that brands are capitalizing on social issues like Pride Month to boost their sales and improve their public image. Some view this as a form of commercial exploitation where corporations prioritize profit over genuine support and doing well. So, it's complicated for many of us, especially parents. Dr. Doug Flanders says parents aren't meant to child-proof the world, but world-proof the child. This is not easy stuff to navigate. I wanted to bring on a friend of mine to help us do that. Valdamar is from the LGBTQ community and a friend and have been on the front lines of fighting for individual rights and freedom for many years. He's going to help us talk through this. Vlad, I'm so excited to have you here. We've been on the campaign trail a lot together over the last 6 or 7 years since I ran for regent, and you do such an amazing job of inspiring people and bringing common sense to the conversation. I'm really interested in your take on what's going on right now culturally, especially since it's Pride Month, and you wrote a great article that was featured in Campfire, Colorado that we'll link to. Tell us, first of all, a little bit how you got here and where you grew up and how things kind of evolved in your career to get you to this point.
Yeah, well, it's great to be on here. Thank you for allowing me to come on and have a conversation with you. I am Valdamar Archuleta. I was born and raised here in Denver, Colorado, and I grew up in a very religious household, and I kind of evolved from that. It was a Jehovah's Witness household, which is super strict.
Yeah, very.
Yes, they actually threw me out for being gay, and so I no longer am a Jehovah's Witness. But from there, I ended up getting very involved in the LGBT community. I was on the board of directors for the Colorado Springs Pride organization. I worked with them. I was the person responsible for running their parade, as well as parade entry in Denver. I even at one point went to Las Vegas and helped them put on their parade, which is ridiculous. It's like a Macy's Day Parade. It is, because all the professional entertainers from all the hotels and casinos are in the parade. So it's huge. But I learned a lot from them, brought it back to Colorado and implemented it here. Then I moved to Denver, and about that time it was after Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the Defense of Marriage Act were kind of done away with. And at that point, I really felt that as the LGBT community, we had all the rights everyone else did, and there wasn't a whole lot else I really felt that we needed to fight for on a systemic level. On a community level, and with outreach to people, individuals, there's still work to be done. But at that systemic level, I didn't see it being the fight it was. So I kind of just faded out of that world. And then I ended up getting dragged into the world of politics somehow. And that was kind of a slow progression. And it started with I just started really noticing how when Donald Trump was running for president in 2016, people were so against him. Like there was all this stuff about him, and I was like, wow, if he's really this terrible person, how come we never cared until now?
Mm-hmm.
And that interested me, and so I started reading the things about like if they said he said this back in the 90s, I'd go read that article, or I'd watch the video clip, and I can just see the lies that were being told. And I started looking into right-wing politics and found that that was kind of where I fit in. I was like, I actually um I can relate to a lot of what these people on the right are saying, even though previously I had been told these are the bad guys. But I was like, I agree with them. I think this is true. I think that even in when I was very involved in the world of gay rights, we were fighting for the freedom to just be ourselves. We have the freedom to assimilate and live within the population. And that's what it was really about back then. And I feel like I still believe that same thing today. Really, nothing changed. It's just like I feel like that fight has moved over to the right as opposed to where I was, which I guess was the left. Back then, like I really didn't even understand right and left. I didn't really look into Republican, Democrat, because growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, they don't get involved in politics, and politics are kind of like a taboo subject. They don't even vote. Voting is something they look down on. They just kind of don't want politics at all. So the whole world of politics was very new to me. And at first it was kind of surprising to myself. I think that I found that I was a right-leaning person, and I always had been. I just didn't know that's what it was. Um, as far as being like, and when I look at conservatism, I look at conservatism going back to like the founding documents of our country, that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the freedom of individuality and individual rights that the founders fought for. And I think that's really what we need to fight for today. And so I ended up connecting with log cabin Republicans, and the next thing you know, like a month later, the president, who had been the president for a while, was not going to run again. No one was stepping up to run. And so I was like, well, I guess I could do that. And here I am a few years
And
later.
I was going to say, how long have you been president of Log Cabin in
For
Colorado?
two years now.
Yeah, you've done a great job. I see you guys at so many events, and we're a great support on the campaign for governor, and really enjoy my time hanging out with you guys. And we were just talking about being at the booth last summer at the Pride Festival, and the differing opinions you get and the spiciness you get from some folks and the support from others. It was fascinating. But you just wrote a great article that was in Campfire, Colorado. I want you to talk a little bit about that and your advice to the LGBTQ community about how to approach Pride effectively.
Yeah, well, with this op-ed, I kind of just got to the point right in the headline. Pride is counterproductive. And I think that's the first line in the op-ed. I was like, I'm just getting to the point, throwing it out there. I've written several op-eds that kind of touched on this before, but I was much more gentle on the subject in saying, well, maybe it might be counterproductive. I don't know if it's the best thing, but at this point, I don't see why sugarcoating it is going to help. Like it is a counterproductive movement. When we have 1 month of Pride and you have these festivals that parade stereotypes down the street, it's not productive. And in the op-ed, I kind of talked about how like we have Black History Month, and Black History Month has a sense of dignity to it. You look at the people who fought for the rights of the Black community, civil rights leaders, movements that were developed, and the progress that was made, and people who've achieved things. And we don't do that for Pride Month. For Pride Month, we don't look at these historical fights that we fought to get to where we are, or the people who led them. We don't celebrate the freedoms we have. We don't have a sense of dignity to the month. It's just like a freak fest, and I don't see how that helps. Even the people who are like talking about rights and that, it's done so much that it becomes a lecture to the public, that people become exhausted from hearing this message. We start the month of June already exhausted from this message, from having heard it the previous 11 months from the end of the month Pride last year, that by the time July comes around, the world is not a better place for gay people. People aren't less homophobic. We aren't more united as a community. It's actually quite the opposite. I think that we are creating more homophobia in the world, transphobia, whatever we want to call it. And there's not a more united sense of community with the LGBT community living in the general larger community. There's rifts being created, divisions being created. And really what the movement should be doing now, because I mentioned, I feel like on a systemic level, we have the rights we need. We have the rights we fought for. We have the same rights as everyone else. The battle now is going into the community and changing the minds and hearts of people who maybe aren't there yet, maybe who still do think negatively of gay people. And a lot of it's because of Pride and the festivals and the activism that pushes out the most like in your face, extreme individuals, situations, and stereotypes, almost as if that shot campaign is going to help. And maybe it did back in the 70s and 80s to kind of be in people's faces, but right now that's not the way this movement should be going. We should be just reaching out to people and talking to people, having conversations and showing people we're just like everybody else. We're your neighbors, we're your family, we're your friends. We're not this group of crazy sex maniacs that the society paints us as, and then Pride festivals kind of confirm that in a way. That's what the festivals show. So that's kind of what the op-ed was about, is just that I think we need to change course if we really want to make things better, which I do. And I didn't write this in a way that I'm hating on the LGBT community or the population. It's just, if we really want things to be better, there's a better course and a better game plan that we should lay out in doing that.
I agree with that. And I think out on the campaign trail, I talked to so many people with differing opinions and people of faith, and everyone that I met, or the majority of the people that I met, have good intentions. They want us to be accepting and inclusive, and they want people to live freely and to be able to live their lives the way they like. I think there was a line crossed with the kids, and Polis kind of led that with the laws that he's put forward and the conversations he's had publicly about, making us a trans tourism state. That's where we're tipping now. And I don't think it's productive for my friends that are in the LGBTQ community. And I think what you're saying is good advice based on my role as a parent, as a mom, as someone who listened to lots of people on the campaign trail. I think a lot of people have good intentions. They're just kind of exhausted from this fight, and it doesn't have to be a fight.
Yeah.
We can come at it with love and acceptance and invitations to get to know each other better. But this whole trend towards getting our children involved in this conversation and flaunting sexuality in front of our kids, and it's not even about LGBTQ sexuality. It's about any sexuality. It's really frustrating, and we're not allowed to even talk about it, or we're anti-trans, anti-whatever.
Yeah, I think that the activists and politicians who are quick to label people, the media is probably even one of the worst.
They were terrible, though. Like on the campaign trail, if you even had a question about something that was happening in the schools or talking about the sexual stuff going on, the label of the article was always, you are anti-trans. This candidate is anti-trans or anti-LGBTQ. And that was not, 99% of the time that was not the case. And we were just shut down from having those conversations.
Yeah, they're terrible. I have one of my best friends is a lesbian, and her wife, her wife's aunt has a house in Florida. I think it's in Key West, and so they go there all the time. And they just came back, and they're much more left leaning. And so we were talking, and they were telling me about their trip, and they're like, we're not going to go back anytime soon. And I was like, why? And they're like, well, because they hate gay people there, and we don't want to be like they made it seem like they truly and they honestly believed that their lives are in danger if they go to Florida because of the hatred of gay people in Florida.
Oh my
And again,
God.
it's all media perception on these bills. And like they're passing all these bills, and they, what is it? The NAACP says don't go there. And I was like, you were just there. Did anything happen? Like, no. And I was like, well, what bills? Like, what did the bills say? And they don't know. Like, people don't even know why they're upset and why they're mad. And I kind of went through what the bills said, and they agree with the bills. That's so irritating, is that we talked about like trans kids, and I talked about like, well, do you know what like gender affirming care is? This is what the surgery does. These are what hormone blockers do. How old do you think someone should be when they do that? And they agreed that like you should be an adult. So I'm like, you agree with these bills that you're now afraid of because the media told you that they hate you over here, when that's not the case. And it is really annoying the way the media just scares people into believing these things. And people do just blindly just believe anything. They really, it's just the headlines they see people sharing on social media that they base everything on. Because I doubt they even click to read the article. They just see
Right.
these shocking headlines. There's so many lies that people believe, as far as like this is what's going on. And the left, they're very good with language, and that's something that we are not as good with.
But
um
talk a little bit about tactically what we as conservatives can do to help resolve this situation.
well, one thing, like in the article, I touched on this in one sentence. At the very end, I talked about how the counter reaction can be just as bad, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm directing this message to the LGBT community. And I think that conservatives, Christians, kind of should take a warning from what the crazy LGBTs are doing and not do the same thing on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want your counter response to being just as crazy in the other direction, because in the same way, I feel like the LGBT community is turning people off from them. They're pushing people away from them. They're developing a bad reputation and almost just a bad feeling about them. When people think about the gay community, they don't have like this warm fuzzy feeling inside. There's just a negativity to it. You don't want to have that same thing. You don't want to be like, oh, I don't want to hang out with the Christians either because they're crazy. Look at what they're doing. I think there's a huge opportunity right now for conservatives to get that middle ground, because I think the majority of the people are in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're fine with the LGBT community, but they're not okay with transing children or grown adult men dressing like women and twerking in front of children
Yeah.
or dollar bills from a child. Like that, most people would agree that that's a little too far. We shouldn't be having children stick dollars in people's G strings. That is not okay. So I think we have a huge opportunity to win the people in the middle if we just maintain our present an argument and a platform, or whatever, just a case of common sense. Just be normal, just use common sense. It can attract a lot of people. Unfortunately, I think it's the natural response to be just as crazy though the other direction. Like, all right, if you're going to treat us like that, we're going to respond by saying something just as crazy. And like I said, I think that is the natural response. And I really would, in the coming campaigns for 2024 or whatever coming up, I would really hope that conservatives and Republicans stand your ground. Like we see that the loudest people are that extreme minority on the left. The people are like, no, we should trans everybody. I was downtown at the Capitol yesterday for their gun control bill, and the individuals there want like no guns for anyone, not for hunters, not for police, not for anybody. But again, that's kind of a very extreme viewpoint. And the same thing with the whole LGBT thing, the trans movement. There's a very extreme element that's being broadcast, and they're almost like there's a spotlight on them. And I think sometimes conservatives and Republicans may be afraid to speak against that. You shouldn't be afraid of that. Like, one thing I will say about, I think there was a debate back in 2016 that Donald Trump was doing. And one thing I will say he got right in that regard was that he wasn't speaking to the audience in that room. He was speaking to the people at home. The people in that room did not like what he was saying. He was getting booed, but he knew, and at one point he even said, "I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to them," and like pointed to the camera, because he knew the people at home agreed with what he was saying on the majority. And so I think we need to do that, when like, just be normal, say things that are common sense, like we should not be transing children. If you're an adult, you can do whatever you want. That simple phrase right there, I think the majority of the people in the country agree with.
Yeah.
And yet they will make you seem like you're crazy for saying that. So we do need to be brave enough and bold enough to stand by that belief. But we also don't want to go so far as like, so I just think all trans people are crazy and we should get rid of all of them.
No.
Because then most people don't agree with that either.
Right.
So if you take that middle road, that common sense, normal thought pattern that I think we all, or the majority of us have, it is popular, even though the media will make it seem like it's not. And even for us in our day-to-day lives, you may not even be involved in politics or you're not campaigning. We do need to have the bravery to stand up for what we believe, and explain. I think a lot of it is, it's not explained to people.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was saying earlier, there's that the left is very good about controlling language. They'll say things like gender affirming care. We want, just gender affirming care for the youth. And that sounds very nice. But talk about, what is that gender affirming care? Like, what are they doing? And you talk about mastectomies for teenage girls, or hysterectomies, or I don't know if you know what the surgical process for I think they're called neophalluses, and phalloplasty or something like that, where they cut the meat like off your arm or leg and fashion it into a tube-like thing. And I'm trying. How do I describe this with being like,
I
being
think
too
people get
graphic?
the
And attach it to a biological girl to make her look like an anatomical man down there, even though it's not functional. It's not actually a penis. Or for a male, like to remove the penis and genitals. And if you describe these things, people are like, "Oh yeah, a child should not get that surgery." Like, it's not even really a question. But if you say, "Oh no, it's just gender affirming care," it sounds nice. Or even hormone blockers. If you talk about what hormone blockers actually do, and the long-term effects it has on a child, or the fact that we don't even really know the full long-term effects because they haven't been studied, most people will agree, yeah, we shouldn't do that to a child. So I think we need to not be afraid to have conversations with our neighbors. Because I live in Denver, and like I said, I from my days past as kind of like a gay activist, I have a lot of friends who are liberals, Democrats, on the left. I work here in Denver, and so I'm surrounded by liberalism and leftism. But I found that if I talk to people and just explain what I believe, and I don't use the word Republican or conservative, 95% of the time they agree with everything I'm saying. It does go back to the media, politicians, and activists. They've done such a good job of getting the public to believe this side is good, that side is bad. And they make it that simple, and people don't think beyond that it can be difficult. But like I said, if you talk to your neighbors, your friends, your family, you can change people one at a time. and change their viewpoint. And they'll think, oh, well, this person, I agree with what they said. It may open them up to listening to other people, or actually looking into things for themselves rather than just believing what social media tells them. And you never know who you're going to have an impact on. And that's what we have to do. Like, we're not going to win. There's not going to be one massive win where we suddenly change the minds of everyone in the country and have this massive victory. It's going to be talking to people one at a time and getting them to see what's actually happening. I remember last year at Pride, the whole abortion thing just happened, and multiple people we talked to at our Pride booths had no idea what Colorado's law was. And these were people who were pro-choice activists. We're like, no, you can't do that in Colorado. And when they found out you could, they almost looked kind of, they pretended they weren't, but on their face, like I had one girl, she looked it up on her phone, and her face, she looked kind of shocked. People don't know. And like I said, I think a lot of people, when they hear the word gender affirming care, or that they're making laws where you can't do that to a child, they're thinking that just means letting a little boy wear a dress. And like, that's it.
We need to, like you said, make people aware of what that means. Like the abortion laws in Colorado. What does it mean to be a trans tourism state? What does it mean that one parent can bring their child here and have gender affirming care or surgery and without the other parent's permission? Colorado is one of the most extreme states for this in the country. I want to end on a question that I ask a lot of my guests. Can you tell me one truth and one lie you want people to know about kind of this political area or what you're dealing with out there?
Yeah, and maybe I might reiterate some of the things we said, but I think the truth would be that the Republican Party and conservatives don't hate gay people.
Amen.
And I think that's a truth that a lot of people don't know. Some, I think, just refuse to believe it, and because they're stuck with the stereotype, which is funny. Is like, even at Pride Fest, we'll talk about that, and people like this is a festival about tolerance and inclusivity, but for some reason, when it comes to political thought, that's not. No tolerance there. So that would be a truth that I want people to know, is that, we're not hated on the right. A lie, I think, like kind of what we just mentioned, I think the lie would be that gender affirming care is not going to hurt a child.
Yeah, it's innocuous. There's nothing bad about it.
Like there's no bad consequence to it at all. And if the child changes their mind, they can just go off hormone blockers and they'll be all fine. And I know this because I've talked to many people who transitioned and are now in the process of transitioning back. Mm-hmm. And the medical problems they have, the mental issues they're facing, they've been hurt. They were hurt by this process. And it was put upon them in some cases when they were a child who could not consent to this process. So that is a lie, that there is no repercussions for a child if they get gender affirming care.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts and writing this op-ed. It is brave and bold, and that's exactly what we need right now. And that's what Unleashed is all about. So I really appreciate your time, Vlad, and I will hopefully see you at one of the festivals this summer, and happy to come to the booth and help you guys out. Again, that was a lot of fun last year, and I wish you a very, very fun summer ahead.
Thank you. I wish the same to you.